Hey everyone. I just wanted to hop on and do a quick live for today because today is February 3rd. It's significant in the music world. It's known as the music the the day the music died. On this day, February 3rd, 1959, three rock and roll legends passed away, known as Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper. Buddy Holly was 22, Ritchie Valens was 17, and Big Bopper was 28. They died in a plane crash at Clear Lake, Iowa. Hey, Alyssa. Hey, Jamin. And they're forever immortalized in the song American Pie by Don McLean. It was a sad day in history. Yes, the anniversary is today. Um, so I thought I'd come on and do just a quick live to commemorate this day. I'm a big Buddy Holly fan, of course. Um, One of my first records was Buddy Holly. It was my mom got me a 2-record set when I was younger. Played that sucker, still got it, still in great shape. But at the time of this happened, Buddy Holly's band consisted of Waylon Jennings, Tommy Alsop, and Carl Bunch. They were playing the Winter Dance Party. That was a tour at the time. In the Midwest, they weren't doing a whole united from coast to coast. They just played the Midwest, and which featured artists, like Ritchie Valens and Richardson and Dion and the Belmonts. Didn't know that, did you? Let's get rid of this. Hey, story time. Hey, Nitro. Hey, Brat. Yeah, Dion and the Belmonts joined the tour uh, with that. The long journeys between venues on board the bus, cold, because the buses kept breaking down in that day. Uncomfortable tour buses advertently affected the performers with cases of flu and frostbite. Figured that out, huh? So they can't remember the ballroom name in Clear Lake, but after they stopped at Clear Lake to perform, Buddy Holly was frustrated with the conditions that they had because it was a blizzard. And Holly chose to charter a plane to reach their next venue, which is Moorhead, Minnesota. Yay. The show they never made it to. J.P. Richardson, Big Bopper, was suffering from the flu. He swapped places with Waylon Jennings. Didn't know Waylon played with Buddy Holly, did you? Little known history right there. Hey, Steve, how you doing? So, the Big Bopper switched with Waylon Jennings and took his seat on the plane while Assa lost his seat to a coin toss to Ritchie Valens, which is in the ending of the movie La Bamba, or right around there. I'm not sure if it's toward in the ending of the Buddy Holly story. I can't remember. It's in one of those two. And soon after takeoff that night, like I said, it was a blizzard, poor winter conditions. The pilot lost control of the aircraft. It was a Beechcraft Bonanza, which crashed into a cornfield, killing all four on board, which the fourth was the pilot. Hey, Evil Rick, how you doing? Hey, Dark. This event has been since mentioned in several songs and films. Various monuments have been erected at the crash site and in Clear Lake, Iowa, where the annual memorial concert is also held at the Surf Ballroom. There you go. That's where the winter party was in February, right, their last concert before coming up here to Moorhead. A little bit of history, or background, I should say. In 1958, Buddy Holly terminated, we all know, with the Crickets at that time. Paul Anka realized that he needed to go back on tour again for two reasons. He needed cash because the Crickets manager, Norman Petty, had apparently stolen money from him, and he wanted to raise funds to move to New York City to live with his new wife, Maria Elena Holly, who was pregnant with their child at the time. He also signed up with General Artists Corporation because he knew they were planning a British tour and he wanted to be on that tour. For the start of the Winter Dance Party tour, Holly assembled a band consisting of Waylon Jennings, Tommy Alsop, and Carl Bunch, with the opening vocals of Frankie Sardo. The tour was set to cover 24 Midwestern cities in as many days. There were no off days. New hit artist Ritchie Valens and the Big Bopper, J.P. Richardson, and the vocal group Dion and the Belmonts joined the tour to promote the recordings to make an extra profit. So the tour began in 1959 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on January 23rd, with the performance in Clear Lake, Iowa on February 2nd being the 11th of the 24 scheduled events. Iowa, I'm not going to hold that against you. No. So there's a little bit of history for you there on the, just a little bit. I'm not going to do this long for live. I got some plans I have to do. But it started in Milwaukee, ended in Iowa due to unseen ill-fated circumstances. If I go and look at the flight arrangements, that ain't going to matter. But the takeoff, see, I believe, Anderson drove Holly, Valens, and Richardson to nearby Mason City Municipal Airport, where the elevation, 1,214 feet. The weather at time was a blizzard, of course, but the pilot was not cleared or licensed to fly in inclement in the weather because he only had a license to fly visually, meaning that he could only fly if he could see what was in front of him. He had failed many license tests, all that. So he was only restricted to basically daytime flying. So the pilot was never trained to handle this kind of weather situation, and ultimately we didn't know what happened. Which also started the something better. Something good came of this. and not just tragedy. And we'll get to that. Mary Elena Holly learned of her husband's death by television news report. She was only 6 months. She was only married for 6 months and suffered a miscarriage shortly after because of psychological trauma. Holly's mother, when she heard the news, it was on the radio at home in Lubbock, Texas, screamed and collapsed. Within months of Holly's death, official protocols were implemented to ensure that the names of the victims of traumatic incidents were not released by authorities until after their families had been notified. So some good did come of this, but they had to take a tragedy to do it. Ritchie Valens' mom found out from the radio. His brother lived close to their mom, and basically what happened, what you saw in La Bamba is pretty much what happened. Despite the tragedy, the winter dance party, it did continue, by the way. 15-year-old Bobby V was given the task of filling in for Buddy Holly at the next scheduled performance in Moorhead, in part because he knew all the words to the songs. But later, Jennings and Alsop carried on for 2 more weeks, and Jennings took over the lead vocals. The funerals were held individual. Holly and Richardson, which is the Big Bopper, were buried in Texas. Valens was in California. And Peterson, the pilot, was buried in Iowa. Buddy Holly's widow, Maria, did not attend the funeral. She was sick at the time. She later said in an interview, "In a way, I blame myself. I was not feeling well when he left. I was 2 weeks pregnant and wanted Buddy to stay with me, but he had scheduled that tour. It was the only time I wasn't with him, and I blame myself because I knew that if only I had gone along, Buddy would never have gotten on that airplane." That's one hell of a woulda, coulda, shoulda type thing. And I can only imagine the burden that she carried that whole time, knowing that if she was with that, he would not have gotten on that plane. That's a pretty big, heavy burden. Hi, Flossie. How you doing, sweetie? There was a couple investigations into the crash. One was rumored that a gun went off inside the plane, which caused the crash. And it was said by J.P. Richardson's son that the Big Bopper was alive when the plane crashed because his body was found farther away from the plane. Basically was saying that he was crawling to try to get help and succumbed to his injuries a little bit far from the plane. When his body was exhumed to be moved to a different cemetery so that they could put up a statue of the Big Bopper, they x-rayed his bones and stuff and found out that every bone of his body was fractured and smashed and therefore died. The impact caused his death. There was another investigation that was saying that something about the fuel and weight distribution was wrong and therefore caused the crash. Like I said, the good that came out of it is now that they notify the family before anything gets let out. Memorial service for Peterson was held in Ventura, Iowa, on February 5th. Funeral was held the next day at St. Paul Lutheran Church, which is in Alta, Iowa. And he is buried in Buena Vista Memorial Cemetery in Storm Lake. Now, films that you can go see about that mention the crash is the Buddy Holly story, which was in 1978. The film ends as the Clear Lake concert concludes, and a freeze frame shot is followed with a caption revealing their deaths later that night. And the rest is rock and roll. Then the next one is La Bamba from 1987, which stars Lou Diamond Phillips. That's the two movies that have it, that mention the crash. There have been a number of memorial concerts. The last memorable one that I find that they're talking about is February 2nd, 2009 at the Ballroom, which held Delbert McClinton, Joe Ely, Wanda Jackson, Los Lobos, Chris Montes, Bobby V, Graham Nash, Peter and Gordon, Tommy Elsalt, and a house band featuring Chuck Leavell, I think that's his name, James Hutchinson, Bobby Keys, and Kenny Aronoff. I do believe Waylon Jennings had passed at that time. J. Perry Richardson, the son of the Big Bopper, was among the participating artists, and Bob Hale was the master of ceremonies as he was at the 1959 concert. There are some monuments at the crash site. They got a kind of a signpost with Buddy Holly's signature glasses. And at the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake, Iowa, there's a monument in front of the building. And then there's another memorial right at the crash site itself. The Buddy Holly's glasses were put in place in June of 1988. So, and then you've got it mentions roads around there. There's a road going around the ballroom that's known as Buddy Holly Place. There's some songs that mention it. Tommy D recorded 3 stars, commemorating the musicians. 1961, Mike Berry recorded the tribute to Buddy Holly. Don McLean, of course, American Pie. That's the big one. And in 78, Waylon Jennings briefly added his own memories of the incident onto his song A Long Time Ago from the album I've Always Been Crazy. He sings the lines, "Don't ask me who I gave my seat to on that plane. I think you already know. I told you that a long time ago." That there's just a little history into the crash and the memorials that set up. And the Winter Dance Party is an annual event. Actually, it is going on today. I think 7, 8 o'clock tonight down in Clear Lake, Iowa at the Surf Ballroom. Tickets are $50. I looked it up. And hopefully I can go like next year. I'm sorry I'm not putting your guys' comments up on the screen. I do apologize for that. I'm a big fan of Buddy Holly. I love Buddy Holly. Ritchie Valens. Love Ritchie Valens. Big Bopper. I love Chantilly Lace. That was his big hit. Thanks to my mom who brought me up on 50s and 60s and folk music, I was able to appreciate Buddy Holly and these guys. Hi, Carmatic. Hey, Lady Love. How you doing? But you can dig deeper into their lives. Like I said, Buddy Holly grew up in Lubbock, Texas. Um, the Buddy Holly story is a very good story about his life, how he got discovered. He was playing in an ice roller skating rink. Sock hops were big back then, early 50s, late 50s. And he started playing rock and roll. His buddy, one of his friends, owned a radio station, recorded it, and sent it off. And it's basically how he got discovered. And he was a musical genius. At age 22, he was using orchestra in his music. And one of his biggest that I absolutely love is True Love Ways. Look it up, give it a listen. It's a beautiful song, very well done. I love how he, on one of his songs, how he did the violins, how it plucks to sound like a raindrop. Very interesting. And Ritchie Valens was in high school when he made it big, and what he had to go through in his life, being Hispanic, I can only imagine what the troubles that he had to go through. But I don't know much about the Big Bopper other than his big hit was Chantilly Lace, and he was a DJ that had a big hit. Back then, DJs were recording songs, coming, having a hit here and there. So that's all I know about J.P. Richardson. But I felt it was a need to come on, commemorate this day, February 3rd, 1959, the day the music died. Imagine what music would be like today if all three were still alive. Which could be said for like Elvis and Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, all these people that have died young. What would music be like today if they were still alive? Waylon Jennings kept talking about Buddy Holly and how he styled his music, his style of playing around Buddy Holly. He felt that he had to keep Buddy Holly alive, his music, his style alive. And he did so by incorporating into his country music. So I thank you all for coming out, checking my live. Or thank you very much. Always remember this day every year, because what would music be like today if they had all still been alive? What would it would be like if they didn't get on that plane and made their next concert and the Crickets reunited with Buddy Holly? They were going to reunite in Moorhead and become one again. That's a we'll never know type thing. But we know the influences that they've had on the music industry and the music world. And for that, we're very lucky and very grateful. Thank you all very much for coming and checking out my live and listening. Thank you all very much. I think a lot of those artists are allowed to speak. Yes, very much so. Thank you all very much. Please remember February 3rd, 1959, the day the music died. Never forget it. 3 great artists perished that day. Thank you all very much. You all have a nice day. I'll catch y'all later.